going to talk about abortion today, okay, guys? Okay. My general idea is that abortion, with not only just the health risks from just the procedure itself, but like from social issues and other like really big stigmas, can actually be a deterrent from you wanting to do that. So my argument basically is that we should use more and encourage more conventional forms of contraception, including the morning after pill, all that, because of the risks and bad things associated with abortion. Now, I just want to come out and say I don't want to offend half of the entire audience in this room right now. So I mean, if it gets really too offensive for you, then go outside. I'm only reporting what I researched and discovered. Okay? Cool. Alright, so just a few statistics. About 1 in 5 American women will have an abortion. So that's an entire demographic. These statistics are from about 2-3 years ago. So they're still relevant. They're consistent with another study that I researched that was from '92, so that number seems to be pretty stable. About half of all pregnancies are actually unintended. So there's a certain amount of unpredictability with how we reproduce. So that's why we should encourage more contraception. And 4 in 10 of these unintended pregnancies are in the end aborted. So this issue kind of affects a lot of women in the United States. So post-abortion grief. This is my first point. Is that after having an abortion, some women will develop certain grief symptoms. The reason why I do not have a statistic for the amount of women that have grief is because it's an underreported number due to the amount of social stigmas that we have. They develop certain symptoms that are conducive to post-traumatic stress disorder, and because it's actually so common, they have an official name for it, post-abortion syndrome. What happens with post-abortion syndrome is that women can actually hear things, like they hear a baby crying in their house when they don't have a baby. They have like intense like dreaming about a child, or they regress back to childhood memories. They experience like psychosis. Like what I mean by that is that they get like literally crazy like with their menstruation. Like they see things and have hallucinations. It's very intense and scary because women get committed to hospitals. There is a lack of treatment with post-abortion syndrome. Patients that experience it will be dealing with the symptoms, the trauma, all of it for a very long time, and they won't register it as grief, which is a problem. Speckard, Anne Speckard, has a doctorate. She did this study in the 90s, and she says, abortion has been viewed solely as a coping mechanism with little to no consideration that it also could be experienced as a traumatic event. So essentially, what she's saying is that because we use it more of a contraceptive method, and it's viewed as that way, that we cannot register it as grief if you feel bad about it. When actually it is the case. Women will develop attachments to their unborn child, which is okay, but sometimes they cannot support that. When they finally eventually do come to terms with making it as grief, then treatment can start, and they are given regular therapy, and it can quickly be corrected, but only until it's realized that it's a trauma. A lot of some women, they don't even get treatment till middle age, and they are not able to actually have a child until then because of this condition. Grief and trauma can actually affect men too. Not as badly though. They will typically regard the decision with relief, and that it was responsible and the reasonable thing to do because it was done with their partner. I don't know, I don't have any statistics or anything for men that weren't part of the decision-making process, so I cannot factor that in. Some still have to do some therapy and counseling for grief too, though, because they also develop feelings, that's natural. I'll talk about this in a little bit more in more detail when we talk about social stigmas. And the biggest part is society. Our culture right now is doing like basically a turf war between pro-life, pro-choice. There's really no argument that exists. Texas, there are numerous clinics being shut down. Planned Parenthood is becoming like a race from the entire state. Couple quotes here. Norris and his team, or her team actually, essentially they figured out that most women will want to keep it to themselves, or at least half of them, a good amount. They won't even mention it to family, friends. This essentially it shafts them into a little hole, so it just increases the amount of trauma that they undergo. So imagine all your social support that you have. You rely on friends to deal with grief, trauma, all that other trouble. When you have to keep a secret to yourself, about something that's bothering you, you do not get that social support, so it essentially just boils inside and it damages you. Speckhardt also mentions, because the loss by abortion is not a socially recognized one, or because when it is recognized, the action by which it occurs is condemned, support for grief work is not readily available. So essentially they are afraid of being condemned, and if they do it, they are essentially condemned. This is an interview with my father whose parents had a few abortions. And do I just click on the video?
Should, yeah.
They were living in Boston at the
Ignore
time.
the
My
animals.
mother had several ectopic pregnancies and miscarriages. Because of significant scarring and health issues, it was necessary for them to practice birth control, which in 1960 in Boston for a Catholic family was not done because they were going to commit a sin. They both went to confession. My mother went to a younger priest who understood that God did not want her to die because of getting pregnant, and of course gave her absolution. My father, unfortunately, went to an older priest at the same parish, and he said, no, you're committing a very mortal sin to practice contraception, and did not give him absolution. He certainly took it to heart, unfortunately, and although he did still continue to attend church, he never celebrated communion again. One of the conditions of celebrating communion in the Catholic Church is that you cannot be aware of a mortal sin that you have. So although he went to church, he never took the bread again for the rest of his life.
So even though that was back in the 60s, it applies today because of for example, Texas again, where they are basically abolishing the right to have an abortion. And what happens is that if you do have it, then you're essentially excommunicated from whichever religion that you're part of, if they're not that tolerant of what you do. And another social misconception is that a few organizations recognize the Plan B pill, which is the morning after pill, as abortion when it's not. For example, Hobby Lobby right now is in the middle of a lawsuit at the time that I researched it, which was last week, that they are not going to provide insurance for that for their employees. This is a misconception because medically it is not considered abortion or miscarriage. It's essentially what happens is that it floods the uterus with hormones and stuff and prevents fertilization or anything. So it's when other forms fail. So regardless of the morality of abortion and whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, we cannot ignore the threats that are imposed by the trauma that someone can experience. 1 in 5 women, and if you take a large percentage of that women that experience a trauma, that's a lot of women running around with, you know, untreated trauma. And the social stigma is becoming lost to your friend group or organization that also poses another threat. What we should do as a society is encourage more contraception, use more education, encourage everyone, you know, give out condoms, other things like that, because the risks are really high and really costly. And wrap it before you tap it.
Oh my God. Beautiful. Okay.